Welcome back to the All Outdoors Photography Podcast, where we share experiences out in the field and educate others through landscapes, wildlife, macro, and more with photographers from around the world. And today we have Tony Baldasaro on the show. He's a nature and landscape photographer from New England. Welcome, Tony. Go ahead and start with this question here. Tell us about a time when you're absolutely in awe of the natural scene in front of you and how it felt to be in that moment.
Yeah, that's a great first question. I can remember a time in Oregon shooting the Hasita headlight, and we were up on if you've ever been there, you know there are essentially two locations from which you can shoot the light from, and we were just up on the hillside, and the wind was whipping, and it was mostly cloudy, and we just kind of sat there and waited and waited and waited, and then finally we had this little break in the clouds that let just enough light in for this image and for us to create our images. And, we sat there probably a total of an hour and a half for a 15-second burst of light. And, it was wonderful to get the image that we wanted, but it was more about just being there and being somewhat in the elements on the Oregon coast. That's a moment that I'll carry with me for a long time. I really, that struck me in quite a profound way. I'll say that. Yeah.
It's awesome. Yeah. Do you find those kind of moments rare, or do you experience it kind of every time you go out in the field?
I wish I experienced them every time I went out in the field. I would say that when I slow myself down and when I just take stock of where I am and be less concerned about creating an image and more concerned about being present, I would say that those experiences happen more frequently than if I am not. They are, and I try to, because all too often you go out in the field and you come home and there's a shot that you didn't quite get, or things didn't come together like you had hoped. And if your goal is to always come home with a perfect shot and not experience nature, then I think you're missing the bigger picture of it all. And so I do try to take a moment with each experience and try to take it all in as much as possible, and just really enjoy the scene and the setting, and just be thankful for and grateful for the experience to be out there. But I can't say I'm perfect at it. But I know that when I slow myself down and do, those experiences tend to be more fulfilling and greater in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially when you're traveling abroad like that, like going to the Oregon coast. It's like you may be, like if you dropped a new location, very excited, and you may rush through like your compositions or something. But if you really just kind of take a step back and distance yourself, you really kind of soak in this scene in front of you, and you might take better images as a result too.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think I've traveled quite a bit for photography, and I've seen people get frustrated that conditions aren't perfect. They think, well, this is my one opportunity to be here, and the light isn't right, and so on and so forth. And the chances of getting the light you want or the conditions you want on the exact time and day that you're going to be there are pretty low when you kind of think about it in the grand scheme. You can plan, of course, and you could try to be there when you think the conditions are going to be ripe. But overall, it's still a lot of that is out of your control, or almost all of it is out of your control. So when you go to these places specifically for photography, and when you don't get the shot you want, if that's the purpose you're there, it's going to be a lot more disappointment than not. And so to try to put yourself there and be in the time and space and be present there and allow the photography to come to you in a way, I think does result in certainly a better experience, and then many times a better image in the end as well. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. What kind of photos are you like setting out to take when you go out in nature?
I really two types of photography: landscape photography, and then a lot of wild bird photography. Every once in a while, I'll capture some deer or porcupines or other ant bears and stuff like that. But that's kind of secondary. That's because those animals happen to be the location I happen to be in, and I was lucky enough to capture them. I don't actually scout those out. Um, so it is a little bit seasonal for me. So for example, right now we're getting ready for migratory birds to return to New England, and so I'm pretty much out every day looking for birds and trying to capture wild birds as they migrate north. So not doing a ton of landscape work right now, but that'll shift, and I'll begin to do more landscape work. And we can talk about this, but I really like the multiple genres. I like the ability to do things other than just go out there with my wide angle lens and try to create a landscape. I like the challenge of also trying to shoot wild birds that have no idea that you're trying to take an image of them and are not going to follow your rules. And it's just a fun kind of a new challenge. And I love birds, so it really kind of is a fun genre for me to explore as well.
Yeah, for sure. That's
Yeah,
that's great that you're kind of like combining the two to as well. I know in the past you've given like a lot of talks on this, but do you want to kind of go into some of the lessons you've learned about kind of switching back and forth between the two genres?
Yeah, it's really interesting because when I started to do both of them, I thought, well, this will be great. I'll get up early in the morning and I'll do some landscape work while the light is, sunrise or what have you, and then I'll extend my day and I'll do some more. I'll put on my different lenses and I'll go shoot birds. And what I found really over time is that I kind of do one or the other. I've done both out in the field at the same time, or at least on the same day, but I tend to concentrate on either landscapes or birds, depending on location, time of year, things of that nature. And so, um, the lesson, a couple of the big lessons I've learned is you know, I've been in education for a long time, public schools, and we have kids who I've seen kids more and more these days when it comes to being athletic to try to begin to specialize in one sport or another, and I've always encouraged them to play multiple sports because the the skills that you're going to learn in your spring sport are going to help you in your winter sport, and your winter sport's going to help you in your fall sport, and so on and so forth. I mean, it's just those skills all come together and merge and pollinate one another, and what you learn in one sport's going to help you become a better athlete overall, so on and so forth. Well, I kind of believe the same thing with photography. If you shoot in multiple genres, and in my case, landscape and wild bird, I think I become better in both of them. So, for example, wild bird photography has taught me to be ready because they're going to show themselves really when they're ready, and you have to have your camera at the ready at all times. And then you got to be ready to shoot. And but at the same time, that muscle memory from landscape work is helping me to try to position myself in a place where the bird might make for a better image. I try to keep in mind the backgrounds of the birds. I try to keep in mind where the light is. All of these, skills that I've learned with landscape, where I've had the ability to take my time and get my tripod out and position myself in such a way that all just gets sped up when it comes to the bird photography. And then vice versa, with birds, you got to be incredibly patient. And if you don't get the shot one day, you've got to keep going out and getting it and try. Same thing with landscapes. I've gone to locations 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times for a shot that, in my mind, hadn't come together yet. And so that willingness to be patient and continue to try to get back and get the shot that you want, or to have the I guess stick with it, if that's a word, stick to itiveness. to continue to try to get the shot that you've envisioned. I think that's come from my bird photography because, I might find a bird in the field that I'm trying to get a shot of, and I might miss it that day. But if I go back the next day or the day after, he or she might be back, and I'll just continue to try to get that shot. So that patience and stick-to-itiveness, I think, has helped in both areas as well.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, you started with landscapes, so that involves kind of a lot of composition.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the number one thing there. Have you applied any of that to your wildlife?
Well, I've tried to. Again, the birds don't always cooperate, right? Like they're not always going to sit on the rule of thirds or in the right branch or what have you. Certainly, I try to keep all of those things in mind. So I try to be on the right side of the sun, for example. So I want to be shooting with the sun at my back as much as possible. I want to have the light on them as much as I can. I want to try to position them so that their background is not distracting. It's a lot like landscape photography in that you are trying to exclude all of the stuff that isn't going to help you tell your story. So, I really firmly believe that making images is all about telling stories. And in landscape work, we try to limit the story to only that which is essential for the image. And it's the same thing with birds. I try to put myself in a position where I'm going to be able to tell the story without a lot of clutter, without a lot of distraction, and with hopefully, ideal light. And you could do a little bit of planning for that. So, for example, on the coast here of northern Massachusetts and New Hampshire, there are in the winter we get short-eared owls that come down from Canada and north, and they're pretty regular in terms of their flight patterns. They fly at dusk or just before dusk, and if you know where they're located, you can position yourself so that you have the sun, at your back or your sun in a good spot. You generally have a sense of where they're going to fly to and from. And so it's not that unlike a landscape image in that you can position yourself and you can use tools to try to guess where the bird's going to be and how it's going to fly and how you want to position that with the landscape and the sun. But then then ultimately it depends on the bird, showing up and doing what you had hoped it would do. And so, the compositional pieces are really similar. It's just much less predictable, and so you have to be patient in that way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Those birds, they kind of live on their own schedule, and it's like you just have to really, in such a way, react to it. I mean, you can plan so much, but then it's also just the cards you're dealt with it too.
Oh, absolutely. But that's the beauty of it, right? Because it's not predictable. Mm-hmm. It's not. You're in their turf, and it goes back to our initial conversation. If you're going to go for a walk in the woods and be angry that you didn't find the bird, you're not there for the right reason. So that to me, that's just what that means. Tomorrow I get another chance to go look for it, and that that's sort of my thought process around it.
Do you get a higher rate of success with landscapes, you would say, or wildlife?
That's well. Can I answer that question with a both?
Yeah, sure.
And I'll explain why. I took a group out yesterday morning to shoot wild birds, and most of them hadn't done that before. And the first thing I told them was, look, for you're going to get incredibly frustrated because it's going to take you 100 shots to get an image that you think is going to look good, because these birds move, and and you can't just sit there and wait for the light to be right or what have you. You just got to be ready to go. Whereas in a landscape image, you can obviously wait for the light to be what you want. So, like I said to them, and I don't know if this is true or not, but if a landscape image, for every 10 landscape images out there, you get a keeper. I'm not saying a portfolio, just a keeper. That's probably 100-to-1 ratio with birds. So I'll go out. I was out this morning and I probably shot 600 images, and there are about 5 that I'll keep. Or not portfolio, but they're good enough to keep and have around. So, but at the same time, I'm more likely to come home with a bird image than a great landscape image, because I'm not as dependent upon the light and the conditions when I'm out doing bird photography, because if I'm in the woods, the conditions are they're in the woods, and so yeah, we might get pockets of light, and you might get dappled light, or you might get fog, or some other things, but it's not as condition dependent necessarily. And there are hundreds of birds out in the forest. So while the one that I'm not there to shoot, or excuse me, while the one I'm there to shoot may not be there, another one might. And so while I may not come home with the image that I was hoping for, I might come home with another great image. And I think that's a little less likely with landscape work. So the answer is both. I mean, I think if you've planned your landscape shoot, you get the right conditions, you're more likely to come home with, the shot, as opposed to, again, you just can't plan for the birds to do what you want them to do. And so you might come home with a shot, but it may not be the shot.
Mm-hmm. Or the shot that you had envisioned at least too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so since you do both wildlife and landscape, do you find yourself, I know you said you don't really juggle them necessarily when you go out on a photo trip, but do you find yourself incorporating a lot of the landscape in your wildlife and your bird images?
I try to. Yes. It's hard, especially with smaller birds, because they move around so quickly. But with the larger birds like eagles and snowy, we have a ton of snowy owls here in the winter. I do try to put them in the landscape as much as possible, to include the landscape as much as possible. I think like everybody else, I have the portraits, if you will, the close-ups, the just the real nice shots.
Frame fillers.
Yeah, exactly. But then I also, I have one image of a snowy owl that I particularly like, and it was sitting on top of a lobster trap that had washed up on shore, and so to me that was part of the story. The story was the snowy owl on top of the lobster trap that was all beat up and damaged by the storm, and both of these things were out in the in the wild, and they're beat up and in the conditions, and so that to me that was the story. I could have zoomed in on the owl more or cropped more or whatever, but I thought including the landscape with that lobster trap made sense in that case. So yeah, I try to if it makes sense. I think I think I do try to do that, but with the smaller birds, sometimes you just got to get them when you can, and like the warblers and kinglets and things like that. I'm just trying to get good sharp images of them, with their colors and with their markings and so on and so forth, so that they really stand out in the image. So I can't always plan on them being somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's good to incorporate a little bit of both too, especially get a nice variety with your portfolio, and like you said, especially with those kinglets. I mean, they bounce around and never stop moving too.
Yeah, they do. I've been one of the shots I've been trying to get all spring is the ruby crown kinglet kind of flaring up that ruby crown of his, and I've gotten a couple close, but never. When they get real excited, that hair or those feathers will stand up on their head, and I've gotten great shots of seeing the red on the top, but I've never gotten that sort of flare up the top, which is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you find yourself shooting a lot of bird behavior in your images?
Yeah, I try to. Certainly right now we're as we get closer to their return in the mating season. Like this, we have a cedar waxwings up at this. The male will feed the female berries all the time. We see that with sparrows up here quite a bit, and then of course, all of the warblers are singing up a storm, and they're great. They can be really great characters to shoot when they're marking their territories or looking for a mate, because they're really bold and they're really out there many times. And then larger predatory birds. I always do my best to get them eating something or catching something, or some people are kind of grossed out by it a little bit, but that's how it works sometimes. I have a recent image of mine called Soaked and Starving, of a immature bald eagle tearing away at a Canada goose. in a rainstorm.
Ooh.
And, I love the image, but some people just don't like it because it's a little bit gruesome and whatnot. So I do try to be a little bit wary of that. And then, if I can actually, capture the birds in mating, that could be a really cool, experience to capture. I've had a little bit of luck with ospreys on that in the past, but it's so fast. It happens so quickly. It's one of those things you got to be patient for and hope you're there at the right time.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Definitely
you
lightning in a
do you
bottle.
wanna,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, so do you want to tell us a bit about some of the locations you typically shoot in, like the types of environments and whatnot?
Yeah. So, I live along the coast of New Hampshire. So I tend to, my go-to spaces near home tend to be from southern Maine to northern Massachusetts. I live about 25 minutes, 30 minutes from the Parker River Wildlife Refuge, which is down on Plum Island. And that's obviously, it's a great place for birds and coyotes and fox and all sorts. I've seen deer out there, even though it's sort of out in the middle of it's mostly marsh. But there are about 300 and I want to say 360, maybe 370 different species of birds that have been identified out on Plum Island, and there's some great predatory birds out there. Northern harriers are really common, and they are really fun to shoot because they tend to fly. Not They don't tend to fly high off the ground. So, there's a few occasions where they're basically eye level with you. And so you're shooting them eye to eye, which is really cool. I already mentioned the owls that come by, and then bald eagles and ospreys, of course. A lot of Cooper's hawks and sharp-shinned hawks. And so we've got a lot of great predatory birds, peregrine falcons and merlins also. So you got a lot of great predatory birds out there that you can capture, hopefully, during their hunt. And then during migration season, the warblers are just out of control down there as well. So that's a big place for me. There's also a few places along the coast here. There's a state park called Odeon State Park, which is right on the ocean. So we have this wonderful combination of forest and ocean birds that it's I don't know, maybe 5 miles of walking trails, and you can be anywhere from on the coast or on the beach to the middle of a forest, within a few steps. So that's a great location, and that has 340, 350 different identified birds in it at different times of the year. So those are two really strong areas for me. And then I go up to northern New Hampshire as well. The northern tip of New Hampshire, Coos County. In the summer, it's great for warblers. That's where a lot of them end up sort of finishing their migration. But it's also a place for moose and a ton of bald eagles up north. And so, New Hampshire's got a lot of pretty diverse wildlife. Not as diverse perhaps as some of the states down in the southern part of the United States. But for northern climates, it's we got enough here to get out and get some great images.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of that kind of like edge habitat's very important, I'd say,
Yep.
for a lot of maximizing the amount of species you get too.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also an area around here. They built a highway over here on the east side of New Hampshire. This was probably 30 years ago or something along those lines. But in building it, they had to create what's called what was called at the time the Brentwood Mitigation Area, which was they had these because they were building the highway over wetlands and wild areas, and so they had to build new wetlands and wild areas. And so there's this area not too far from the house, which has, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 different ponds and wetland areas, and it's really lot of diversity of birds in there as well. But as you talk about these edge areas, and that's exactly what it's like. You'll go from walking in the middle of the woods to on the edge of the field to the edge of a pond, in these sort of transition areas where there's so many birds and wildlife, different wildlife that live that just really react well or survive well, I guess I should say, in these transition areas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm kind of curious. Do you use eBird at all?
All the time. Yeah, all the time. That gives me a sense of that's certainly what's migrating in and what have you. But it's not always. There's a lot of local knowledge as well. We try to be protective, if you will, and respectful of the animals as well. So we try to be careful about exposing their locations too much, especially with, we've had issues with snowy owls here in the past. There was I would say 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, there was just a huge influx of snowy owls. We had somewhere near 100, and they figured there were somewhere near 180 snowy owls in about a 30-mile stretch along the coast of Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. And maybe it was a little bit longer. There's like Boston up to Maine, so maybe it was more like 50 miles, 60 miles. Which was wonderful and what have you. But the problem was it just drove a lot of people over this way, and they weren't being respectful of the people's property, but more importantly, they weren't respectful of the animals. They were trying to get up too close to them and stressing them out and things of that nature. And that does happen quite a bit still with some of these large, like the snow. Everybody loves the snowies, but the same thing with the short-eared owls. So, some of the animals, some of the species we do try to be protective of, I think, and we try to just be, cognizant of the fact that we don't want large crowds of people to be putting them under stress and what have you. So yeah, eBird is a great resource to be able to see the migration of birds, but it's also just local knowledge, talking to friends, having networks and what have you, help provide ideas to where some of the locations might be, so that we can keep that kind of private, and for those folks that are going to go in and be respectful of the animals and go in and get out and what have you.
What are the steps you tend to take out of the field to be kind of like ethical around the wild birds?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. I mean, obviously there's an equipment issue here. I shouldn't say issue, but one of the reasons why we get longer lenses is that is so we can keep some distance to the animals. Even then, I've seen people with long lenses be either disrespectful to the animals or to the habitat. But I also tend to not. I limit my time around the animals. So, for example, if I find a snowy owl, I'll spend 10 or 15 minutes with it, but then I'll leave, and I try not to bring attention to it or crowd it. And I take some images, and then I feel like, okay, he's given me that time. I've taken it, and then I'll leave. Other people I've seen, there's eastern screech owls that will nest here in the springtime, and they kind of, it's one of the animals that we try to protect the location of, because first of all, they tend to nest in neighborhood areas, and so you don't want people showing up on people's lawns. But I've been to some locations where people will wait 6, 8 hours, waiting for the owl to come out of the nest. And, I just think that is too disruptive to the animals. I think I don't think it's right. So I try to be really respectful of my time there and not overstay my welcome, if you will. And then obviously, follow all the protocols around, leaving no trace and so on and so forth. So I think people can do it right. I try to do it right. I have a lot of respect for the animals, and I really try to be respectful of their space and time, even though it sounds a little funny to think about time with animals. But, I do feel like they are allowing me to be a part of their life for that amount of time, and I don't want to overstay my welcome, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. That's probably something you had to learn all new, when you were kind of moving towards bird photography from landscapes. I know for me personally, it's just not anything I ever really thought about. So
Yeah, although I was in college, I was a biology major and studied ornithology, so I studied that before I became a photographer. So
oh,
I
interesting.
think, yeah, so I think that some of that sense of respect for the wildlife was probably born at that time, and I've just always kind of felt that way.
Got it.
Yeah.
Do they
Yeah,
teach
that's
a lot
awesome.
about ethics in class?
No, I wouldn't say no. I don't think we learned a lot about ethics in class. I just think at that level when you're studying animals, animal behavior, ornithology, what have you, at the collegiate level, I think these aren't like introductory level classes, or they weren't at the time. So I think the people that are interested in that already understand uh, some of the ethics around caring for the space and what have you. Um, so yeah, at least I would hope so. But no, I don't remember it being taught a whole lot. Um, yeah. The other thing too, we were talking about equipment. There are times when I'm out there, if I'm doing landscape work and I don't have my longer lenses with me, and I'll see something. There's a whole bunch of times I've been out on the coast and seen either an eagle or an owl or what have you, and I'll just, I'll appreciate it for being there, but I don't even try to do anything with an image because I know that the only way I'm going to come away with something is if I get too close to the animal. So just being aware of the equipment that I have and really if it's going to be if I don't have the right equipment, I just again appreciate the animal for being there and for kind of showing itself to me for that amount of time, and then I'll back off and go back to doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's important to like know when to walk away from a photo opportunity, just because of of course, like ethics, or just even if the image won't be quite as satisfactory too with it.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I, I know I've said this a few times. It goes back to our initial comments, which is if you're out there just for the image, I think you're out there for the wrong reason. Um,
Uh huh.
we're out there I am not a person who meditates. I've tried it a few times and just wasn't for me. But I would say that the time I spend out there, and I'm out there almost every morning for an hour and a half, 2 hours, is meditative for me. And so it helps me be healthier for the rest of the day, whether I come home with an image or not. And so, again, if you're going out there just for the image, I think you're going out there for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, definitely. It's like a
Yep.
meditation in of itself too.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So in the similar vein as with ethics, is like conservation, a point that you really drive home in your work, or are you more on the artistic side, or is it even a little bit of both?
Maybe a little bit of both. I try to educate, with some of my Instagram posts or Facebook posts. I'll try to explain, what that bird is or why it's important to, um, why what is about that bird that is unique or what have you. Um, if it's a bird of sensitive or that I feel like needs protecting, I won't put the location on it or I'll just put New Hampshire or something like that. Um, and so yeah, I mean, I try to do a little bit of both, but I would say um, I can't say I've done really anything quote unquote purposely around conservation, but as long as I'm going to be out there enjoying the space, I'm going to let people know why it's worth enjoying and why we need to be careful of it, so on and so forth.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So you have a background as a teacher. How have those skills helped you with your photography education?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's interesting when I do a lot of hiring, or I've done a lot of hiring, and when I talk to people, I'll ask them, you know, how did your job as a waitress back when you were in high school help you become a better teacher, or something along those lines? So it's funny that you're asking me the question and sort of flipping the script on me. Um, you know, uh, Education to me is all about building relationships with the people that you're teaching and supporting. And whether we're learning how to take better pictures or we are teaching children how to read or write, I would challenge you guys to go back to think about some of the best teachers you've had or had in the past, or some of the best experiences. And I guarantee none of them had anything to do with, boy, Mr. Smith really knew how to write the objectives on the board better than everybody else, or, Mr. Smith really, was able to keep his room nice and neat and tidy. Those things are important, don't get me wrong, but the people and the experiences that you remember are the people who made a difference in your lives. And the experiences, we rarely remember a single lesson. Like, I bet you neither of you remember the day you learned about the Pythagorean theorem. But you remember the teacher, if that teacher made a difference in your life, right? Or maybe you remember the field trip or the experience that you had somewhere that made a difference in your lives. And so when I think about teaching, whether it's, again, teaching in a traditional school or teaching photography, it's about building relationships with people. It's about trying to create an experience for them that isn't about, we have to, they have to understand exposure and say the exposure triangle, or you got to understand this. But I also want them to really fall in love with whatever it is that we're trying to do. And if that's photography, great. If it's being outdoors and taking pictures, like secondary, that's okay too. But it's about, for me, it's just about making sure that the relationships are strong and the experiences that people are having are worth their time, or are of value to them. And then the lessons are secondary to all that. They're part of it, but if those things don't come about, if they don't have a good time, they don't have an experience that is of value to them, and they don't feel as though they've made a new colleague or friend or relationship with myself or other people in the group, then it probably wasn't worth my time. It didn't do a good job of it. So I think that's it. And then, of course, having taught and led schools, what have you, for 25 years, I'm very comfortable teaching and helping and providing support and all of the techniques around teaching. That's all very secondhand. Presenting is not something that I do all the time and very comfortable with. So, all of that stuff, I think is just ingrained in me now after 25 plus years of being in teaching. So yeah, it's just been a shift from, teaching in a traditional school or teaching traditional lessons to teaching folks how to, create great images, hopefully.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely, yeah.
And do you do a lot of
Especially
online stuff with that, or do you do more in person?
I've done a little bit of both. The online piece is super helpful for people and can be really help you connect with people that you wouldn't have connected with in the past necessarily, either close by or far away. It's geographically agnostic, which is really nice. The group that we went out with yesterday, that was, 3 hours of hanging out with 8 people and, enjoying the scene and helping people, capture images of birds and understand bird behavior in a way to help them, create great images. I couldn't do that remotely. So, I tend to think the combination of the two is probably right. I think people like the combination of the two. I think people like the convenience of remote teaching and remote learning, but they also crave and seek out the physicality, if you will, of face-to-face workshops. So I think they both could be really effective, and they both can help people get better at what they're trying to do. So yeah, I don't think it's a one or the other. I think it's an and both.
It's good to have, I think, a good feel for both of them, because each format kind of brings something different to the table. Like you said, it's like being in the field. That experience is, you can't really match that virtually. You need to be out there teaching people hands on with certain kind of like camera techniques and actually taking the images, of course, too.
Yeah, exactly. For the first, say 11, 12 years of my teaching career, I was in a traditional brick and mortar setting from teaching to administration. And for the last 13, 14 years, I've been administrating in a virtual school. And so shifting to that virtual space and teaching in the virtual space is something I've been doing for a number of years now. And so to do it, um, for this is really easy for me, whether one-on-one or in, larger groups. It's something that's come very naturally to me, I guess, because of my experience here. But I would agree with you that, even when we would talk about this with regard to the virtual school that I'm involved with. If a student wants to be a chemist, they should be in a chemistry lab actually working with the chemicals and not just doing it online. They can supplement and it can be a component of it, but at some point you got to get your hands on these things. And I think photography is a big, another good example of that. You can watch all the YouTube videos you want. That's how I get inspired as well. But until you take that camera out and try these different settings on your own, I don't think it's really going to be cemented in a way that's going to become like muscle memory for you.
Yeah, definitely. Photography is like a weird one too, because it's like, nowadays you don't necessarily need like a traditional college degree. Like you can watch a lot of YouTube videos and learn it that way, or like attend one of your workshops too, versus something like a biology degree, which, I feel like is a little bit more different too with it.
Yeah, but I would say this, that the one great thing, look, there's a lot of ups and downs to being as connected as we are to the internet and so on and so forth. But the one great thing about the internet being connected to people, so on and so forth, has been the democratization of information. And that is that, 25 years ago, if you wanted to find out information, you were going to learn that from, quote unquote, an expert, whether it be your teacher or your professor or someone in the field, so on and so forth. And getting access to that expert was not always the easiest thing. Now you can find experts anywhere in the world at any time. And so, just because I have a biology degree doesn't mean that I know more biology than somebody who's studied it perhaps informally for 30 years. And the same thing goes with photography. Certainly having a formal education in photography helps with networking and connections, and certainly it's probably a more straightforward way to go. But there are so many people in the field, professional and amateur right now, who started out doing something else and picked up a camera one day and started learning about it and realized that this is what they want to do with the rest of their life, and they never went to college for it. So, yeah, I mean, having all the information of the world at your fingertips is a double-edged sword, because certainly there are some downsides to it, and I think generally speaking, humans do a really poor job of vetting information, of figuring out whether information is good or not. But at the same time, it is a great way to learn, and it's a great way to become an expert in something without that formal piece of paper. And I think it's in that way, it's been remarkable for people to learn how to become photographers. The other thing I would say about that really quickly is, digital cameras have allowed us to experiment and learn and try new things at, a very little cost. We haven't, both in time and money, in the field whether you got the shot you wanted or not. In the old days, you'd have to go get the film developed and so on and so forth, and then you'd have to buy more rolls of film and all of that stuff. So the instant feedback that you get from digital photography has allowed us to become much better photographers much faster than we would have in the past. And so, the explosion of information and the instant feedback have really allowed digital photography to become, really anybody to become expert photographers, which is, a great thing. And while it hasn't helped some areas, so prints and so on and so forth, it's tough to monetize that. There's a lot of people learning how to do this for the first time still, and so that's a great opportunity for folks to get into the business if they want to.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, those are all great
Did
points with just the information age of it too.
Hmm. Yeah.
did you start it all with film, or have you always been digital?
Well, I did have a film camera growing up, and the interesting so great irony here. When I was in high school, I signed up for I wanted to take a photography course, and I couldn't because it conflicted with my Spanish class that I needed to take. And so my parents said no, I had to take Spanish because you needed to take languages to get into college and so on and so forth. So I did. I still had a film camera. I just really didn't know how to use it all that well. And then, um, fast forward, I don't know, handful of years, and the next camera I bought was a digital camera. So yeah, I mean, there are some people out there who say that they wouldn't even know how to put film in a camera. And I'm not talking about like amateurs. I'm talking about there are professional landscape photographers I know who have never put a roll of film in the camera, which is fine. I'm not making fun of them at all. I at least have done that, but I can't say that I was very good at it back then. Really, it's I've been a product of the digital age more than anything. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you sometimes I guess there can be benefits to starting with film, but I think getting in starting with that technology too, that more modern technology, uh, perhaps gives you an edge in other areas like editing and computer working with the computer and everything like that. So
Yeah. Look, I'm sure that there are amazing film photographers. I know there are amazing film photographers out there, and I know there are people who do both. And it's just not. I don't have the time to figure out both right now. So,
yep.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a whole different devotion too.
It
Just
is.
getting the film. It's
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's just a whole different thing, and um, so it's just yeah. I never really look back at doing that at all. So.
Yeah, fair enough. So switching gears here a little bit, you produce some calendars and some photo prints. How's your experience been with both of those?
Again, the prints aren't really much of anything in terms of um, sales or anything. People aren't necessarily interested in prints. I do sell some locally and have some in various offices and things like that. But that to me is it's those are things sort of a little icing on the cake, if you will. There's nothing I really can plan on. I know other people do a really good job of it, and they market the heck out of it, and they spend a lot of time and resources putting together that stuff. It's just not an area that I want to do. The calendars I've been doing for 4 or 5 years now, and those again, those I usually sell out every year. Um, I make a little bit of money doing those, but I also give away a lot to family, friends, people I've done work with. So my goal with those calendars has never been to make a ton of money with them. I certainly get my money back and make a little bit of money with it and a little bit of profit, but I give so much away that that I'm not very good when it comes to using it as a business piece. But it's what it's a great gift for me to give to people that again friends and family, and then other people that I've done business with or people that I feel connected to in a way. And I really have no problem with doing that. So and they're also just fun to create, and mine hangs on my wall, and you know every month I get emails from people saying, "Oh, I love May" or "I love June." So that's really cool, and it's a lot of satisfaction in that way as well.
Yeah, that's
That's
great.
awesome.
It's like a gift that you see all year too with it.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yep, absolutely. And then what I'll do is usually in September, October, I'll start advertising for it, and um, get enough pre-sales so that I know that I can get them printed, and then like I said, usually sell out sometime November, December, and just get them out to people. So it's really cool. I like it. I like doing them. I like the feedback generally is pretty positive, so that's always good. If people are unhappy with it, I usually just send them their money back, and I don't squabble too much with it because it's not worth that to me. Again, it goes back to that idea of hopefully creating a good experience for folks. So if people are just going to think of their experience with me as being angry about me not giving them, a few bucks back because they're not happy with the calendar, then to me that's not worth it. So again, the calendar is not it's almost like gosh, I forget what marketers call that, but it's, I just kind of throw that out there for people to, gosh, what did they call that?
A tester or feeler?
No, it's like you're not going to I don't take a loss, but it's not going to be a big money maker for you, but it helps solidify relationships. It helps solidify my place as a photographer, so that when people during the course of the year try to remember who's that person, all they can do is look at the calendar and they can think of me. So I can't remember the term that marketers use for that, but they have a special term for it.
Yeah, it's right on the tip of my tongue. I can't remember it either. But
it sounds very familiar too.
It's a loss leader. Yeah, that's what it's called, a loss leader.
Oh,
yeah. But again,
right.
I'm not taking a loss here. I make a little bit of money doing it, but I also look at it as a way for me to continue to connect with people throughout the year. So yeah, it works in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Do awesome. Calendars feature like your bird images or your landscapes or both?
Well, that's always the question every year, is how much I do. It's mostly landscape, and because it's people over the years have really enjoyed the New England. I have people from all over the country that will order it that either used to live in New England or have a connection in New England. So, for example, it almost always includes one or two of the lighthouses up here in New England, or relatively like this year's October is Jessup's Path up in Acadia National Park. So places that people know and have some connection to. Neville Lighthouse up in Maine. That's a really popular location for couples to get engaged and even married at. And so a lot of times they have that connection to the location. So there are some specific locations that I tend to include in most years, which means I don't usually have a ton of space for birds. In fact, this year, I'm looking at the calendar right now, I only have one bird in it. It's from May. It's of a yellow warbler. But it's also a very, scenic image as well. And so it's just a really nice, I guess, graphic for May. And so graphically it came together nicely. So it isn't necessarily about the bird, although it is about the bird. It's just a nice scene as well. So, the people that are going to buy that are not birders necessarily. They're landscape, or they're more interested in the New England landscape. And so I'll sneak a bird or two in it, if it includes some of the landscape, but, generally speaking, they're looking for scenes and landscapes from New England. So that's where I tend to go.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely good points there. Yeah, so as we wrap up the show here, Tony, is there any big photo trips you got planned, or any shout-outs or bits of advice you'd like to give?
I'll be in Oregon coming up at the end of the year with the Out of Chicago group, and I have a really strong connection with them, and I've done some presenting work for them, and I've also been a participant in a whole bunch of their workshops. They're a really good group, so big shout out to them. I also, let's see, so if any sort of last minute pieces of advice or what have you, I have found over the years that photography has given back to me more than I've given to it. I go to bed every night. Can't wait to wake up the next morning to go to the location I'm going to, whether it be for birds or landscape or what have you. And so that excitement every day is something that, photography has given to me And I don't know if I ever would have expected it to do that. It has become less about creating the image than creating the experience. Certainly, I love to create great images, and I'm not not suggesting that that isn't important, but it's about the experience much more than it ever is now about the image. And it hasn't always been that way, and so I think that that's come after, over time. And so, tomorrow morning I'll be at Odeon State Park over here on the coast, again looking for migratory birds because that's what we're doing now these days. And I may or may not see them, but I'm going to have a great walk and I'm going to have a great 2 hours. And so that experience again that photography has afforded me is more than I think I ever would have expected it to. And so I'm very grateful for that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts tonight. They've been great and
Thanks.
very informative and very helpful to the audience. And before we go here, if you just want to mention kind of your best social media platforms or website or whatever for people to check out.
Sure, yeah, thanks for giving me a chance. So I can be found at TonyBaldasaro.com. So that's TonyBaldasaro, TonyBaldasaro.com. And on Instagram is probably the easiest, is Tony Baldasaro Photography. But if you go to TonyBaldasaro.com, all of my links can be found there. So, yeah, appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, no worries.
Awesome.
Yeah. Make
Thanks
sure
so much for
everybody
coming on,
checks this page. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching the Owl Outdoors Photography Podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and the video version on YouTube as well. You can subscribe down below, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you.